Let's take a look at some student work for the try one more. Round 381 to the nearest 10 and 100. How did this friend round 381 to the nearest 10? Say your answers out loud. Yes, that's right. I heard friends say that this friend started by thinking, which place value am I rounding to? Because we know that we might be rounding to the nearest 10 and 100. That's super important. Then they thought about their landmark numbers. The two tens, their number was in between, which was 380 and 390. They identified the midpoint by thinking, what is halfway between my two landmark numbers? Why is 385 halfway in between 380 and 390? Go ahead and say it out loud. That's right. We know that 5 is half of 10. And if we were to add 5 to 385, we would get to 390. If we took 5 away, we would get to 380. Then this friend placed 381 on the number line below the midpoint because 381 is less than 385. Based on where they have placed the number on the number line, where does 381 round to? Say it out loud. How do you know? That's right. It rounds down to 380 because it is below the midpoint. How did this friend round 381 to the nearest 100? Go ahead and say your answer out loud. That's exactly right. This friend started by thinking, which place value am I rounding to? This time we're rounding to the nearest 100. Then they thought, what are the two hundreds? Their number falls in between. Our landmark numbers are 300 and 400. Then they identified the midpoint as 350. Why do we know that the midpoint is 350? Go ahead and say your answer out loud. That's right. We know that 50 is half of 100. So if we added 50 to 350, we would get to 400. And if we took 350 away, we would get to 300. This friend placed 381 above the midpoint. Based on where they placed the number, where would we round 381? Yep, that's right. We round up to 400 because 381 is greater than our midpoint. I bet some of you started thinking about the patterns that we learned and realized that there was a way to round without even using a number line. How would we know that 381 rounds down to 380 when rounding to the nearest 10 if we didn't have a number line? How could we use that pattern we talked about earlier? Go ahead and say it out loud. Yes, that's right. We remember the place value to the right tells us which way to round. So if we're rounding to the nearest 10, the place value to the right is the one that helps us round. We see a 1 in that place value. So we know that it rounds down because if we have a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the place value to the right, we round down. Nice work. How could we determine that 381 rounds up to 400 if we didn't use the number line. Challenge yourself to use the pattern that we've noticed earlier. Yes, you're right. We remember the place value to the right tells us which way to round. So if we're rounding to the nearest 100, that means the tens place is going to tell us how to round. We see an 8 in the tens place. So what does that mean? Say it out loud. That's right. 8 in the tens place tells us to round up, because if we have a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 in the place value to the right, we round up. Today, as you complete your work, please use a number line to show all of your thinking, and I encourage you to start using the patterns that we notice to help you round even more efficiently.